one final aspect that I hadn't really discussed that has almost as much to do with the law of attraction as the dynamic of setting the space and understanding the trend, along with detachment and so forth. But what really makes this cosmic law of co-creation what it is through action, as we know. So it really has to do with understanding when action is right and then moving into action because we feel almost intuitively moved to take a possibility that's come up and actualize that possibility, to move into it instead of continuing to wait for some fantasy. We're actually moving directly into something as we see it arise. And that leads us into the actuality of what we could call immersion. And so, if you can see that with just about any extremely successful individual who engages something with a true and profound success, that would be those people who truly immerse themselves in their field. They really, really immerse themselves in what they're looking for and what they're wanting to create in their life. So we have to ask the question, first of all, are we using the law of attraction for the purposes of staying secluded, perhaps avoiding anything that might feel uncomfortable or that might be outside of our comfort zone? And then if the answer is yes, then the trends that we will tend to set are going to be more based upon eliminating those factors first, the sense of vulnerability, the sense of needing to be isolated or protected, you see. So then we start to look at those, at the we start to look at the aspect of what are you really looking for, and then you can start to see it in a different perspective. You can start to see what you're looking for in a different perspective. So instead of looking for protection, you start to look at how you're moving with life, and your awareness of life, you see. Instead of looking at isolation and staying away from the bigger picture, groups, etc., we start to see, how am I interacting and what am I avoiding? And we start to target those trends. So setting new trends to actually target the sub-issues that are actually holding us back from immersion. And now ultimately the goal is to immerse yourself, so you have a target and you have a trend, and you've set that, as we've spoken about, with setting the sacred space and then really engaging that with feeling and devotion and connection, to where you're really, really delving yourself into the feeling of that trend and so forth. Once that is done, once that's been accomplished, then as quickly as possible, we're looking at actually creating an immersion into the very field that we're trying to manifest. So that is not terribly difficult, because there's an abundance of opportunities to really immerse oneself in the actuality of what they're looking to create. So this is actually a no-brainer. It's very, very simple to understand that as we look to co-create with life, we're actually looking to immerse ourselves in what is already a success story. And then we start to see that the entire field of data that we need, all the information we need, the how-to, it's all already there. It's already being done. So when we get really, really specific, we can understand that we can really immerse ourselves in specific fields that have a very specific quality, and that those fields will then help us work the trend all the way through in the way that we have desired. So I'll give you a slight for instance. A lot of people have a subconscious block around money because they've seen so much abuse of money, and they're afraid of power because they don't trust themselves around what might happen if they had power. Now, that being said, the first thing you'd want to do is actually immerse yourself in a sub-trend, because we'd be looking at the sub-trend to all of those fields I just discussed: money, power, etc., and abuse. Immerse yourself in the understanding of what it is to those individuals who have properly they have used money intelligently and properly. They've been humanitarians. They've been really involved in the right action amongst the use of their money, or the use of their field of resources. And then as you start to immerse yourself in that, then the mind and body starts to relax around the idea of money, because you see that there's actually a much, much bigger, a much greater understanding and a much bigger picture around money now, instead of just money is abuse or money is the problem. Or relationships, we could say. Someone who's been abused or hurt in a relationship, so it's very difficult to engage in another relationship, or a person might feel specifically unworthy of a good relationship because of their history. Right away you're looking at fields where you're immersing yourself in the people who have already overcome that. So those are aspects of sub-trends that can be used, where you're actually immersing yourself in something that will be a remedy for those issues holding you back from the primary immersion you're looking to achieve, which would be to go right into the field of what you're of the target. So the target might be a better career, or better finance, better money. You start to see what is holding you back. You start to see the sub-trends that are subconscious patterns. You immerse yourself in that first, and as that starts to clear, the idea of moving into other possibilities, actually hearing when those possibilities become available, suddenly that becomes altogether realistic for you, because those other subconscious trends are not playing out behind the scenes, blocking you. Because I have seen this again and again, where I see that there are people that want to, say, manifest either affluence, or they want to invent something, and they're given again and again the opportunities to do that. But what I see often happens is, because of those subconscious sub-trends that are having to do with other issues altogether, they don't feel worthy of it, or they self-sabotage. So that in the law of attraction, self-sabotage is one of the most common. And then a person gets this ambiguity, the sense of, well, it just doesn't work, or I guess it's just not for me. So this section is actually a remedy for those people that might say, well, this just isn't for me because I'm not worthy, or I don't get it, or I guess it works for other people, but it's not going to work for me. So we understand the sub-trends, we tackle the sub-trends, and then we start to move forward into the immersion, directly into the actual trend that is in the target field. So at this point, it's probably starting to really become very clear that this is actually, the law of attraction is about looking at things in patterns and in layers. You start to remove certain layers of belief, or a belief would be just almost a counter trend. So if you have a sub belief about your worthiness to have affluence, or your worthiness to have a good relationship, for instance, that belief in that, or playing out as that sub trend, that counter belief, is actually going to block on a subconscious level any trend that would be set for the primary target. And then we will be confused as to why the process isn't working. So this discussion, or this talk, should cut right through that confusion. And then when we engage, we are understanding the layering effect, and then we start to uncover patterns in our behavior and in our interactions with life, where we might be turning down exactly what we want to create. You see, and then when we start to see that, we can understand much more clearly as to why it's not working for us, and we can correct that by actually looking at and going after those sub-trends as to why is it that we are turning down exactly what it is that we want to create. And then we can face those aspects that we might be avoiding. And this is all about getting right to the heart of the matter, because we are all co-creators with life. And so long as we stay isolated in certain belief structures and don't uncover those and find the patterns therein, then we'll continue to get the same pattern, the same results. The same result will continue again and again. And then that just ultimately feeds into this somewhat ambiguous realm of adrenaline, cortisol, of feeling a rush and just engaging something with maybe too much energy and too manically, and then that failing, and then kind of folding and collapsing into a state of hopelessness, and then that cycle just kind of repeats itself again and again. And these kinds of patterns, they arise from these sub-trends, or these counter-trends that actually are counter-beliefs. The belief, I deserve a good relationship. The counter-belief is, I'm unattractive, I'm unworthy, and I have no value. That might be a counter-trend to that, because it's countering a trend you might set, because it's a subconscious belief. And when that trend is set to say, I take action, I move forward, and I accept new opportunities, or I am available and open to somebody that might connect with me on a level of relationship or business relationship, then that counter trend that's subconscious is going to be canceling quite a bit of the emphasis and the energy to move forward. So that's why it's so important to look at the law of attraction as layers and patterns. Of course, the Orgone Generators are going to create a tremendous amount of availability and extra space and strength to move forward. What I'm giving here is just more of an advanced way of looking at the architecture and the landscape of the law of attraction and how it actually plays out. So then when anyone engages, they're engaging with real understanding and real emphasis on the result, so that we're not just playing a game with ourselves. We're actually moving into our potential. So I will leave this this point, and we'll start to move now into some of the other specific points regarding the law of attraction to kind of bring everything full circle. Okay, so we're moving on to other aspects, kind of wrapping up the whole circuit of information regarding the law of attraction and every aspect that is the most pertinent to really condensing and focusing this understanding. So for this continued section, really what we're going to be focusing on is the step-by-step understanding of exactly what piece by piece we should be tending to. And we really start, just to recap, starting by understanding the framework as it was laid out, step by step, understanding each step of the framework of how to apply the law of attraction. But within that, we have to look at the bigger picture, and the bigger picture really starting out with understanding your environment, cleaning and cleansing, energetically cleansing your environment to remove any old residue of doubt or anything that might be blocking your primary trend. And then once that being set, really having a clear understanding by consultation, usually of an expert astrologer, someone who might be involved in Vedic astrology, for instance, gets down to the heart of some of the areas typically that might be blocked. And when we really look at the areas that might be blocked, which is what Vedic astrology it focuses on that, then we can start to use the program, like say with the RAD5, a little easier with the bigger devices because you can actually work with the planets. You can start to maximize whatever planetary trends are going on. So to have a clear understanding of the season you're in is critical. And it's part of its intuition, part of its passion, just what you're really experiencing and where that passion is coming from. Setting the stage in your environment for creating the trend, but then the trend itself really should link to the whatever the target might be. That should be really reflected or reflective inside of whatever the greater astrological continuum is. So knowing the weather pattern, if you're going to be looking to catch sun, then you're not going to be going out to sunbathe in days where you're expecting rain. Instead, you're going to be maximizing what you can do to capacitate the momentum around your final goal, the trend, the ultimate goal in whatever it might be. You're maximizing that by looking at the weather patterns astrologically, the atmosphere. They might be conducive or they might not be conducive to whatever it is you're trying to co-create. And so if they're not conducive, then you can really engage with sub-trends, with like really taking out counter-trends, counter-beliefs, and then understanding that certain seasons, it might be a little bit more of a waiting game. It gives you the patience, it gives you the understanding, and then it also gives you the ability to focus on the areas that are going to be the most pertinent when it comes to finalizing that reward of experiencing the trend coming to life and the relationship with whatever the target is really blooming and flourishing. So that's a really, really solid intro that we look at, setting the stage, cleaning the environment, having that whole space set with intention before you even write the trend. And then understanding once the trend is written, you're applying the law of attraction as we gave step by step earlier in the series. Step by step, really understanding each one of those steps, applying them in earnest, along with the understanding of the greater astrological continuum, so that there is a much, much more concise understanding as to why either things seem to be accelerating in a fantastic way, or if things seem a little stuck, knowing how to get down to some of the sub-trends, to remove some of those counter beliefs, and then really moving forward into maximizing whatever the season is and the flavor of what you can get done. And then you're once again moving with layers within that law to then move forward into whatever is the maximum level of yield with whatever you're trying to accomplish. So that way there's a much greater realism and realistic understanding and expectations around knowing how things work in the dynamic sense. If we're blind to that, then we're going to be drifting along with a lot of fantasies and perhaps becoming frustrated because we're not really setting the stage, we're not really knowing our environment, and then ultimately we're not following the step-by-step procedure. We're missing entire gateways or doorways into exactly what it is we want to create. And then when you have favorable times, using that to the maximum, because some astrological patterns will be incredibly favorable for whatever it is you're trying to accomplish. And if you know that, you'll also know that, well, now is a time not to delay. It's a time to really act, and then you'll launch into action without really giving it another thought, because you'll know that I really feel it, the energy is available, the circumstances are ripe. It's a great season, so to speak, astrologically, to really connect with and move into trend A, B, or C. So this coming full circle, astrological consultations give you the ability to maximize your trending by giving you the season that you're in and helping you select what you even want to focus on. Some seasons might not be as conducive for relationships, for instance, but they might be really conducive for business, for making greater affluence, or the trends, they just go on and on and on. But you'll be able to really tackle what that season is meant to embody, and you won't be sidestepping the potential you do have. You'll be able to maximize that. And then out of that, as the season changes again, astrologically, then you will come into seasons where perhaps relationships or other aspects that you're looking to co-create are much, much more precise, and the continuum is ready for that. And then if you're engaging at that point, now you're in a position to really co-create and not find a lot of frustration, a lot of forcing things to try to be a certain way. You won't be getting into that game, So it's a harmonizing, literally a flow and harmonizing with nature. Okay, another element in the law of attraction, as recap, that I really didn't go into very much during the series, is a very, very much the forefront in capacitating the actuality of manifestation and co-creation, is the act of reciprocation, to really reciprocate. And we know this intellectually, at least I hope we do, but when it comes down to the actuality of the law of attraction, is you're never doing it alone. It's something that you're actually synergizing through the process of letting go, the process of clear understanding, clear vision. You start to pull in a totally different vibratory continuum into your world. Now, when we start to work with others, then we'll start to receive from the world, from others. And then for some people that are unsuccessful, some people who are actually finding it, the whole principle isn't working for them, there's a tendency to receive and take, and then we forget what we have received from the other. So there's a little story I'll tell you about. It actually comes right out of nature, and it's about the law of reciprocation and the law of reciprocity, to really give back to those who have helped us, who have benefited us. And it's the story of the honey badger. And this story really amazed me when I heard it, because it does come out of something that is as plain and simple and basic as nature. So there's an actual, well, they call it the honey badger because this particular kind of badger likes honey. It's really, that's one of its staples that it goes after. It looks for honey. So there is a little bird that is symbiotic with the honey badger, and the bird will follow the honey badger around. After it has scoped out where there might be a bee's nest to go get honey, it'll actually find a honey badger, and it will start to pester the honey badger until the badger becomes really furious and incited. I'm not suggesting we do this to our associates, but basically in this act, it has to get the badger's attention. So it gets the badger's attention. Badger becomes agitated and starts to follow the bird, and then the bird will stop every so often to let the badger catch up. But at a certain point, the badger doesn't even know why it's following the bird. It just knows that it's following this bird, and the bird just keeps stopping just in with enough space that the badger doesn't fall behind, and they keep going. And at this point, the badger is just going on trust. It just knows that to follow this bird is important. And then finally, the bird leads the badger right to the honeycomb. And the badger can go and enjoy a wonderful meal. So it grabs some of the honey. But this is the part that really dials it in. When the badger has received its meal, it always, without fail, takes a big part of the honeycomb and throws it out into the open where the bird can also enjoy the honey. So it always instinctively leaves behind a piece of the spoils to say thank you to the bird. And this is how the symbiotic relationship of life actually capacitates itself. So when we're in relationship with others and we're seeing that they're either giving us support, helping us in some way, or they've opened up doors for us, it's all too easy to say thank you very much and then move on to the next thing, because it's almost kind of like a passing fancy, like, okay, that was good. But we have to remember that what others do, those constitute the rungs of the ladder we're climbing. And each rung of the ladder is, we have to see it as critical as the end goal of getting to the top. If you're wanting to come into a place where you're in the top of your field, you're moving into a much greater continuum, well, it's going to take rungs. And each rung is a critical adjunct to the entire process. So instead of just walking on people's backs to get where we want to go, which ultimately comes back to us in the form of isolation and a lot of adversarial relationships, or just in general, the energy that it spawns is just a very low vibratory energy of I'll take, but I'm not going to give back. So we want to keep it in really concise terms. We want to make sure that we are keeping a to-do list to, in the right way, give reciprocity back to those who have helped us. And that might be in keeping our commitments to them. It might be in staying the course with something that we're doing until its completion, and making sure that it's always a win-win scenario. This law has to be win-win, because in the circle, even in physics, the circular unfolding of life, everything always comes full circle. So when it is win-win, that means that we're actually that we're wishing for other people, which is that they also be successful, that they also be happy and fulfilled ultimately. The desire for those others to become fulfilled, it comes back to us. And that energy will continue to move back into our lives in mysterious ways and in beautiful ways that we couldn't have even imagined. So with that said, remember the story of the honey badger. In everything that you do in relationship with your associates, your partners, and those people that you're really wanting to engage with. So moving on to the next element, really, really critical importance, action. And I spoke about that earlier in this discussion, but I'm going to reinforce it because we really are going bullet point by bullet point at this point. Reinforcing that action, once the environment has been set and held that space, and then the trend has been set, and the target is clear, and the sub-trends are becoming clear, then action is to be really present in your environment with a detached awareness. So not looking for what it is that you want to show up, because then you're actually missing. You may actually miss what can spontaneously show up, because that is a big part of this cosmic law. With expectation, with our line of sight on just the target, we miss the process. So staying away from being so fixated on when is it going to show up, why is it not coming to a culmination that I'm expecting. When we leave that behind, then we allow it to grow. So again, let it go and let it grow. Letting it go meaning that you're still synergizing with the process. You're trusting the process. You're trusting that you have set an appropriate line of sight. You've dealt with the counter beliefs that are under the surface, and you're dealing with them as they surface. But then as opportunities avail themselves, you might notice that if an opportunity comes to your attention, you might actually go for it because there's a deeper intuition. But you might feel that there's some fear around taking the opportunity because it means expanding perhaps, or it means that you might have to let go of certain things. And when you're engaging in that fashion, then you can actually look at where your fears are and then use the sub-trends within those fears, like counter those fears with the Orgone Generators, set sub-trends that'll actually deal with and counter the various blockages psychologically around competence, around ability, etc., to engage, because we will be at that point. Once the opportunities start opening up, we'll have to face certain elements where we might be holding ourselves back and say, well, that's not exactly the way I wanted to create the event. That wasn't exactly what I was thinking about. But that might be what has, say a door opens, that might be the door. And given that we're using intelligence and we're flowing with intelligence, then when certain opportunities avail themselves that you feel are maybe they don't feel right, you'll trust that also. But it won't be the sense of holding yourself back because you want it to look a certain way, you want it to be a certain way, or you're feeling a subconscious or conscious fear around taking the opportunity. You're actually moving into the opportunity. And remember, we have to embrace failure in the law of attraction as well. Because if you're looking at this as, now that I've engaged and I've got the powerful Orgone Generators behind me, it's going to be just smooth sailing, then that might be a little bit unrealistic. Because you need the rough waters. You need the moments where you actually give yourself the ability to fail as well. So you can learn from your mistakes. You can learn and go deeper with the process. I'm not saying we're going out expecting to fail. There's actually a great optimism when you're engaging in this manner, because you have space for things to go left when you thought they were going to go right. You have space in your continuum for that. And then you're trusting that when you go left and things veer off and they seem to be canceling out your dreams, canceling out your plans, that actually might be a big part of what is going to enable your plans to come to fruition, because this is a great mystery. We're in this beautiful mystery of life. And so as you take opportunities, you're feeling into the vibe of the opportunity. And if there's a clear no that comes up that has, it's not because you want it to look a certain way, and it's not because you're feeling some kind of apprehension around fear, and it's just simply, it's more of a solid feeling that would come to you. It's more of a resolute no. And that's how you can tell the difference between where you're holding yourself back and where you actually have intuition that that's not the right direction. And it's really as simple as that. So you start to fine-tune those senses where you start to move with life, and you start to see when it is appropriate to say, no, that's not right for me. And then jump on to the opportunities that actually do come that are right. And then ultimately with opportunity, we know that sometimes life avails many opportunities at once. And when we get excited about things, we have to be careful how excited we get and how amped up we get about things. So letting yourself observe it, letting yourself stay relatively grounded. You can still enjoy that opportunities are coming your way, but engaging it in a way that isn't going to be so up and down. We want to stay away from anything that's manic or depressive. We don't want to go from one pole to the next. We're seeing that opportunities might be availing themselves. And then we're also holding ourselves back in a certain way from taking on too much at once, because that's a surefire way to fail, is that we glut our plate with too much. And then it's really too much to chew on. It's too much to do. And that's when we start letting people down. We start letting ourselves down, and it starts to fold. So really understanding that we're dealing with one thing at a time, and that certain secondary opportunities will avail themselves, but they really should dovetail into what it is that you're working on currently. So you're not leaving things half done. You're not jumping from one opportunity to the next because you're wanting to grab as much as possible. You want to stay solid, because that's how you start to build credit. You start to, it's almost a psychic intuition people will have. They'll start to feel that you're trustworthy, that you follow through, and that you fulfill your commitments. Because even if you were to leave one opportunity for what seems like a better opportunity, that might happen occasionally, but if you haven't fulfilled the commitments in the first opportunity that you engaged, what happens with that is that on a psychic level, the whole continuum is going to feel that, the whole playing field. And everybody you meet on some subconscious level is going to feel that you will be one to jump out of a situation if it's if you're hitting roadblocks, or if it feels like it's not happening as fast as you want, or a better opportunity arises. People need to know that you're committed, and circumstances will reward you for that commitment, because you're going to play it through. You're going to see it through. You're not going to bail when things get a little bit difficult, or things slow down, or a better opportunity arises, you see. And then building your own inner integrity and that inner commitment is literally like building a credit line, which will then help you vastly down the line. So. Okay, going over a really quick summary recap of the elements within the law of attraction as we had gone over them earlier in the series. So basically, we start with having clarity as to what it is you want to frame within your objective. what exactly is it that you want to accomplish. And with that comes the authenticity in the objective, the authenticity in the trend, to where you're really, what is the authenticity behind what your objective is. Like finding that in yourself. And then when you're praying for that, when you're putting that intention out, really being sincere about that. Knowing the power of forgiveness, really understanding forgiveness for others and forgiveness for self. Huge, very, very important. Seeking forgiveness where we've possibly hurt others or even hurt ourselves through our lack of understanding. Huge part of it, gratitude. And that's really where it starts. Even taking a moment to step back and experience the gratitude for the ability to contemplate, the ability to even create a trend. If we can look at the small nuances in life, we start to realize how enormous and what a gift these things actually are. And so then we can move forward inside of that atmosphere of gratitude. Feeling grateful is only going to beget more and more connections, alliances, and alignments with what is ultimately going to be truer for you and truer for your objectives. So visualizing in color what you have, what your objective is, and as though you have it now. That's a huge one. So in color on the right side of your body perception. So a big part of it, the right side in color as though it's actualized now. So really moving into the feeling part of it, because we have to remember that with emotion is literally the Shakti that's merged with the plan. So if you've got a plan and you've got the Shakti or the Orgone energy merged with the seed, which is the intention or the trend, those two merge, and then that begets emotion. So the emotion in the body, in the soul, is actually the culminative creative force in action. And that's why we want to look at our emotions, find out where our emotions are running us, find out where those subtleties of emotion are actually doing us harm. So bringing that back to gratitude again is that contained sense of a yes to life and a yes to what we actually have. So actually finding what is it that I actually have. Going back to that old saying, that we walk on a mountain of answered prayers. All the while we're looking at the next peak. What's more, what's higher, what more can I get? Instead of really reflecting back on what we have been given and all the blessings in our life. I think if each and every one of us just took a moment to just do a simple self-reflection on that one point, then the energy that will culminate because of that reflection is automatically going to bolster your co-creative process enormously. So a big part of the process could be said to be really praising and showing respect to the higher elements within life. Some people like to call it the divine. Other people like to call it the higher self. Whatever you might call it, the element or elements within life that are the higher qualities and principles that actualize what it is that we're looking to create or co-create, that we're not doing it alone, that no human being ever acts autonomously apart from life. So looking at life as something that is a co-creative process across the board. And so then really giving thanks back to those elements that we're aware of, and some that we aren't, that are actually constantly stabilizing, helping, and giving us greater insights into perhaps why we've been in cycles, or we've been playing out circular trends that have been maybe less than altruistic for us. We actually start to give gratitude for seeing these things for ourselves so we can make a change, and then really start to see life through different eyes. So with the gratitude and praise of those higher elements, really allowing detachment to be the platform of the co-creative process. Because as we create a trend, and then the Orgone Generators are catalyzing that trend, things in life will start to change. And if we don't have detachment, we will be continuously projecting onto the process, really looking at why did that change? Why are things not changing quickly enough? Am I worthy of what I'm asking for? All these elements can become a circular argument in the mind, and it can actually be very counterproductive to the end goal, which is as quickly as possible allowing a space to be made that, like a vacuum, can pull in what it is that will be the most uplifting, beneficial in our own lives. And then finally, allowing commitment. So with detachment comes commitment, because as we see that things are not going to just leap out of nowhere suddenly because we've written a trend. Sometimes they will, but for the most part, it still is a process. So the commitment is, am I following through? Am I really keeping my word to those that I'm working with? Am I keeping my word to myself? And if you notice that any of these things are missing, if the mind is too scattered and all over the place, this is where determination and commitment actually become one of your greatest platforms, one of your greatest allies. To be determined isn't enough. That determination needs intelligence to back it. And then through that intelligence, you can really make a commitment, because commitment isn't just doggedly staying the course to something that is dull, boring, and ambiguous, but rather it is a sharp and clear understanding of the objective and the process. And when that understanding goes very deep, it's a joy to be committed to something through difficult times, through lucrative times, allowing the process to play out. Part of commitment is detachment. So allowing the detachment in the mind will open the heart. And then the heart starts to lead the way. And as that path is being forged, what you might actually wind up co-creating with life may well be far beyond what you had hoped for. Because we shoot for a specific mark, a specific outcome, and then through the detachment we find that the outcome we're shooting for may actually morph and turn into something even greater. And this is a possibility that very few people actually contemplate. That we think that through detachment, it means we're possibly letting opportunities go. We're not pushing it, making it happen. Because as we can see, much of the world is benchmarking success through, is my agenda playing out as I have determined it. And then when we start to watch the flow of life, we start to see that the great mystery of life starts to unfold in a way that we can't even fathom. And that the beauty of that the experience of that is that you actually start to have unexpected and inconceivably beautiful crossroads that you come to, where you actually start to see that what you've been asking for really is the purpose of your own heart. We've really been looking for fulfillment, because when we find purpose in our heart, then ultimately from that purpose comes fulfillment. And then the fulfillment is self-sustaining. And that which you co-create within that is going to be much more satisfying, much more beautiful. And certain things along the way that you believed were necessary for happiness, actually in your mind, as you go, they might actually start to fade and be replaced by much greater potentials. So, not to shoot for unrealistic goals, or to say, well, I want this, but if I focus on this, then I'll obviously get something better, because it's not really about that. It's really about allowing the process to ultimately secure exactly what you're looking for, or greater. And the greater will always be a surprise, you know. And I've experienced this so many times over, and a lot of that just comes out of gratitude. Because when we start to see the incredible potential within every moment of our existence, even the difficult times, the potential is that those difficult times give us insights, and the insights really lead us to something that can't even be fathomed. The power and the beauty in the true purpose of the heart. So, in essence, we're really kind of coming to a close here. Quite a few points to kind of summarize. But the forefront of this entire process is be true to yourself. Be true to yourself, and be true to those you love. Be true to the world. And that circle that you start to create based upon deep understanding, commitment, love, and attachment will really start to authentically bring to your life the peace and the fulfillment that you've been looking for. And then from there, the entire cosmos is open. The entire world is open. Because we're not looking at things in such a monotone manner. We're not seeing things in just one perspective. We start to see many perspectives, many elements within the co-creative act of life. And from there, gratitude just continues to spring up in the mind and in the heart. So once again, this is Jason Kryzak, co-founder of Radiant Family, and my truest heart's wish for you is that you be fulfilled, and that your dreams absolutely come true, sooner than later. So continue the beautiful work that you're doing, or if you're just starting, best of journeys to you. Continue to work with the generators. Continue to go deeper, because what you've found today, and if you already have one of the generators by now, you might find that what you're seeing is just one layer of potential. And as you go deeper and start to develop a relationship with the generator, you'll actually find that you'll start to see greater and greater potentials within the device. As I said, that relationship will actually foster new dynamics of how you're using it, how you're working with it, and then even what we've discussed throughout this series of the law of attraction is just the tip of the iceberg. Because the human capacity, your capacity, is far beyond what you've been told. And that goes for every one of us. And so that's my greatest wish for you, is fulfillment, and for you to truly discover your purpose in this world. So with that, many blessings, and until next time.